For more on the conflict in the Middle East, we're joined by retired Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster. He's a CBS News foreign policy and national security contributor. He's formerly served as National Security Advisor during President Trump's first term. So, General, it's always good to see you. Let's just talk about why hasn't that MOU been able to hold? I mean, is it simply because it was flawed from the very beginning?
Hey, Vlad, great to be with you and Kelly. Absolutely. I mean, it was unsustainable, especially the way each side interpreted the MOU. If you look at just the first clause, it was to give Iran a say in Lebanon, which never should have happened. But now what you see are the U.S. brokering direct talks between Lebanon and Israel and cutting out Hezbollah. But the main thing is, as you've already covered, is the Strait of Hormuz and Iran's belief that it can gain the coercive power it needs over the Gulf states and over the United States by controlling the Strait. And the real target in the last week or so has been the Gulf states. I mean, the two ships that they fired on, one was a Saudi tanker and the other was carrying Qatar's natural gas exports. And so what they're trying to do is drive this wedge between the United States and the Gulf states so they can get the Gulf states to cry uncle and they can be left in control of the Strait of Hormuz as they reconstitute their missile and drone capabilities. And we think they're getting back to about 50% of the missile stockpiles that they had at the outset of the war.
Oh wow, that's something that I hadn't heard before.
That's a significant number.
That is, yeah. General, where do you think things go from here? Because in some respects, it feels like from the Iranian perspective, it's just kind of like, to your point, wait it out, try and rebuild your arsenal, have there be pressure from U.S. voters on the U.S. to come to some kind of concession. Are we stuck in a cycle of fighting, then getting back to the table, and then it just goes on and on from there?
Hey, Kelly, I think that the Iranians think they're in a position of tremendous advantage right now because they don't think President Trump has the will to sustain a campaign against them, especially with the midterms coming up, especially with his concerns about the economy and gas prices. But I think they're wrong about that, Kelly. I mean, look at what they've done. They've driven past every off-ramp that President Trump has provided them. And while President Trump will always prefer, he wants the deal, he wants to get the deal, when faced with the intransigence of the Iranians and how they were kind of rubbing his face in this deal, they're going to reap the whirlwind again, I think. And I think this is going to be, as I've said before, I mean, you have to look at the 47-year-long war that we've had against Iran. Iran has been waging against us. And so this is not anywhere near an end of the war. This is just entering kind of a new phase, like the ceasefire war phase is what we're in, of the 47-year-long war with Iran.
So we have talked about the United States' ability to degrade Iran's offensive projection in the region, but they're still able to carry on the fight. I mean, so what kind of threat do they pose? Perhaps not to the United States, although, as you know, General, you can sometimes get very lucky, and getting lucky against one of our assets could mean the death of a soldier, sailor, Marine, airman, Coast Guardsman. I wonder what concerns you about that. And then let's talk about our partners in the region who are perhaps even a greater threat than our men and women fighting.
Well, I think our soldiers, our sailors, airmen, Marines, they are doing their duty, and that's what they're focused on. They're focused on executing operations to the highest level of professionalism, and of course, you're always motivated by each other, fighting for each other. And I think every U.S. serviceman or woman understands that Iran has been killing Americans since at least 1983, Vlad, and so they see this, I think, as a very important war, a war that it really depends on their ability to be effective from a military perspective, but it also is going to depend on really the will of the political leadership, the president in particular, to see it through. I mean, war really is a contest of wills, and I think this is where Iran feels kind of emboldened. They think that they have the upper hand. I think they're wrong about that, but I think this is why you're going to see a continuation of this war, an evolution of it in different phases. But winning is effective military operations, but winning is convincing your enemy that your enemy's been defeated. And that's not the condition yet. And we have to also factor in, this is a revolutionary ideology you're dealing with this leadership. They've seen a lot of their leaders killed. They've seen the effective military operations against them taken away, a lot of their assets. And I don't think we're anywhere near a negotiated settlement. I think the United States is going to have to impose much higher costs on the regime to convince them that they've been defeated.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that it's not just it's a country that you're fighting an ideology and a leadership that really clings to that. Just quickly switching gears slightly, there was the NATO summit in Turkey this week. We listened to the president talk. Going into it, he was criticizing the alliance, saying they weren't spending enough. Then it sort of switched to there was a lot of unity at the summit. What's your read? If you were a NATO ally, do the president's words assure you that the U.S. is going to remain an active member of NATO?
They're probably going to just remain on edge, for the next couple of years, Kelly. And I think really what the president should do is take credit, for Europe really stepping up in its investments in defense. 3.5% equivalent of GDP into hard defense capabilities, a total of 5% when you include some of the infrastructure investments. They are sharing the burden. And so I think he ought to just recognize, hey, he's won that fight. I have confidence in the NATO alliance for a couple of reasons. First of all, the threats aren't going away. Obviously, the Russian threat to Europe, but that's connected to China, the threat to China, because this axis of aggressors has coalesced, and they brought into the fold Iran. So the competition with Russia and the need to deter Russia is connected to this broader competition with this axis of aggressors. The second thing is, Kelly, I just don't see an alternative to U.S. leadership. I mean, who's going to lead Europe? I love France, but is France going to lead Europe? Is everyone going to say, yeah, I'm okay with French leadership here, or German leadership, or fill in the blank? So I think, I have great confidence in the alliance because of our shared interests and also our shared principles as free market economies, and especially as democratic governments.
All right, Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, always great to have you, sir. Thank you very much.